Hello, hello. Hi, Vivek and Rashmita. Are you all there?
Yeah, yeah. Rashmita, is you are on mute.
Hi, good evening, Vivek and Nish, and good evening, everyone. So, welcome to Microsoft Reactor live stream event. My name is Rashmita, and I'm the event planner for Microsoft Reactor Bengaluru, India. Before we start today's session, please take a moment to read our code of conduct. We are all here to learn, so please be respectful, mindful, be friendly, and patient to each other. But for now, I would like to ask Vivek how many learn modules he has completed and what is his learnings.
Yeah, I mean, just the background to this is when we started this Chai Samosa series, we had launched the Cloud Skill Challenge, and it is a collection of 26 learn modules. I must say, Dinesh, it's 26 learn modules. Okay, so you
Mhm.
don't expect me to complete it in one day for sure. So, this is the main reason why this Cloud Skill Challenge is stretched across 2 months so that people can spend time, and also I can spend time for and learn all the things which we are learning here, and also go back and try out some of the new things. So given that, what did I learn? Okay, that's a tricky question. So I did draw, wrote the first program with C sharp. There was
Yeah.
an
Do
amazing
you want to take
17-minute
us through the
module.
challenge? Maybe you can just share the screen if you're on the screen.
Yeah, I'll just share it.
Yeah, so we can talk about this.
Just sharing the screen. You can see my screen.
Yeah, it's up.
Cool. So this is the first module which I completed. So writing the first C sharp code, and I did went through the in an introduction to .NET, and of course we had an amazing chat of that in the first session which we did, and after that I spent some time in learning various things about it. And amazing thing about this one is about how do you build dependencies, and how do you use .NET with projects, like basically the package manager, the nuggets, and how do you use nugget registry and other things. So that's something I went through. This is quite a bit of number. It's 26 modules. So I did finish this one, and then I jumped into a couple of things from Xamarin. So last session, I meant, we did talk about Xamarin, and also the Maui and other things. So if you go here, the amazing thing about this is when you go into the summary of this is the beauty of it is, right? This module has Xamarin Tutorial 101. So when I go into this Xamarin tutorial, so you can see there is amazing 11 episodes.
Yeah.
So so I could not complete all the 11 episodes for sure, but I just went through a couple of them, and it is very short ones as well. And if you want to learn something amazing, this is the one which is really cool, because you see the architecture. So that's something which is a pretty interesting one. um, some of these things I went through, and that's it. So I have completed probably some 10 modules out of 26. So I'm planning to do that rest of the things after today's session. So I did went through the Blazor app
Hmm.
as well, but then I found, like, okay, it's better to learn from the expert. Uh, First-hand experience is more important. So I just wanted to make sure that I learn from expert there. So Jeff is here.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's bring him in. Hey, Jeff,
Hey
good
there.
morning.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My goodness. Sorry about that. I misunderstood the invite. That's on me.
Yeah, I
No
think time
worries.
zones are always a challenge. I'm glad we have other channels to connect and do,
Oh my goodness.
query. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So, what time is it now for you?
6 a.m. No
Wow.
problem. Piece of
Thank
cake.
you so much for waking up early for us
Oh
and doing
no,
the session.
I'm normally up about this time anyway to
Hmm.
get stuff ready for kids in school, that kind of thing. So Not a problem to connect with you and talk a little bit about one of my favorite topics today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think before we get in, I think we'll just introduce what this show is all about. If someone is joining us for the first time, this is a snack time chat, which Vivek and I we chatted about. Vivek is totally new to .NET, and so he wanted to learn .NET, and we thought, okay, let's take this chat show. I mean, the chat time that we have casually. Let's take that as a show, and so we do it very informally. Last time we had James Montemagno on the show. We talked about Maui in length. Vivek learned a lot, and he was surprised how easy it is to build mobile apps using .NET Maui. And
Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah, I think it's something which I've started learning now. .NET is becoming more and more easier for me now.
Good.
and
Oh my gosh, that's great to hear.
and good part is, and I'm very excited about today's session as well, because I've been a backend developer all through, and very limited experience in Java, in a JavaScripting. It's whenever I try to learn JavaScripting, there's a new framework out there, and I say, okay, let's go back to my backend development. Let's forget about front end. So and this is going to be most important, right? My important question to you as well is, why should a backend developer should be excited to learn Blazor apps, right? In building Blazor framework, using Blazor framework,
Sure.
right? So
Sure.
that's something which I want to learn from today's session. So all yours, Jeff.
So let me start with answering a little bit of that question before we get into the material that I want to cover today, and I want to get in. I want this to be more of a discussion. You can you already showed there's learn modules out there. There's YouTube videos that we have talking about these things, but let's actually have a discussion. Let's actually I want to hear from the folks out there in chat room. I want to hear from you, Vivek, about the questions you have as I go through and show some of this material, because that's how we learn is actually getting answers to our questions. I don't want you to have to Google or hopefully Bing different topics and different things to get answers as to why I should be checking out Blazor. Let's go through and talk about this together. So please feel free to ask questions. You out there in the chat room, if you're watching, drop a question out there. I'm going to be keeping an eye on chat. I know Nish and Vivek will as well, and we'll make sure that we pause and answer questions. Not a problem to make sure that we go through and talk about all the things that are going on here. So I get in and I think about Blazor because I was in the same position you were. It was, hey, I really enjoy building the back end systems for for a web application. I like building the application server and the various tools and now microservices and functions that connect out to my database, connect out to build various algorithms, work with how to interact with data and make decisions for folks. So when the opportunity was presented, because I was a little frustrated trying to follow all the various JavaScript frameworks, when the opportunity was presented to be able to build a front end build a front end with C# and not be just on the desktop, but be in the browser, I was sold. I wanted to jump in with both feet, and I'm thrilled to be in and working with that. Let me get my screen shared here for you. Sharing screen. This one. Yeah, we'll share that screen over there. Cool. All right. So there we go. So you were talking about learn modules and some of the other content. I want to start off by showing a little bit of one of the learn modules that we have out here for Blazor. This is called Build Web Applications with Blazor, and it's right there. It's in the middle of a Blazor learning path. So I just jumped into, this is the second unit of it. And I wanted to, I like using the learn module now instead of slides to talk through this so that you can see the material, jump right into it if you want to follow up and do this on your own some other time. So this is all out on Microsoft Learn. Just search for Blazor, and this is called Build Web Applications with Blazor. hopefully you already know what .NET is and what Razer is, right? That Razer templating system that we have available so that you can build web pages. We've been using this for the better part of 13 years with ASP.NET MVC and now ASP.NET Core, both Razer pages and MVC. So what if we could take Razer and make it a little bit more useful on the client? And what if we could actually allow you to build and run applications in the browser that run in the browser, just like those folks that are building with JavaScript frameworks? So in Blazor WebAssembly, we have the ability to deliver Razer components that run on .NET and target WebAssembly. WebAssembly is that HTML5 standard technology that allows native code to run in the browser. Let me say that again. Native code running in the browser, not just JavaScript. So now we have a way to take .NET content, deliver it, and have it interact with the DOM directly in the browser. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Now I can send DLLs and interact just like Angular or Vue or React. Choose a JavaScript framework, and I know how to build these things. I know how to build with .NET. Razer is something that we've used. We're going to change the syntax slightly, because we're in a different environment, and we need to be able to adapt to that environment. But that's pretty cool. Now, we also built in a little bit of a fail-safe and a slight change in the technology, just in case folks don't feel comfortable shipping DLLs and all of their logic down into the browser. So we also have Blazor Server over here. Same technology. You can use the exact same the same Razer components, built and run with .NET, but host it on your own web server. Now, hopefully you like running your web server on a nice cloud, maybe a nice blue cloud out there. I don't know. And instead of interacting with the document object model directly in the browser, we'll send changes back and forth, rendering on the server, but send changes back and forth into the browser. We used to do this years ago with ASP.NET. We had Ajax panels for folks that have been around for a long time, right? We had those
Right.
Ajax panels. Gosh, Nish, do you remember you used to click a thing in the middle of the panel and it would refresh
Yeah.
just that square, right?
Yeah, I think the first time that I saw was when we had this Outlook Web when they
Yes.
started, right?
Mhm.
And it was like really magical. I mean, those were the time we used to put this run at equal server in the ASP.NET Web Forms,
Oh
and
my
then we
gosh,
used to
yes.
wait for those, the
Wait for it.
progress bar to turn
Mhm,
and
mhm.
whatnot. And from then, when we saw the Outlook Web for the first time, when it was automatically refreshing those panels, it
Yeah.
was magical.
And Outlook felt like a really good implementation of that, because you click on a message and it was refreshing another panel somewhere else on the screen, and it wasn't reloading the entire screen. Just that other square that had your email in it was updating. It was like,
Yep,
how are they doing this?
exactly.
So
It's so much fun.
So Jeff, I have a question here.
please.
So, if I have, I'm thinking that these are the two ways where you can work with Blazor app. Like you can have
Mhm,
it on the WebAssembly, the
mhm.
complete DLLs, everything shipped with the WebAssembly, or you can have it on the server side
Yep.
of it. And the question here is whether the first part where it's going to improve the performance of the application, the if I'm taking the approach of having the complete code on the client side,
Mhm,
whether the
mhm.
performance will be the better, or the server side will be, there will be a little bit of delay in the server side. As you know, how does you see the performance side of it?
Good question. And the answer is, it depends on where you need the performance. Consider, in Blazor WebAssembly, I have to ship all of my application down into the browser. So just like when you go to Gmail or YouTube or Twitch.tv, right? These big heavy applications that you navigate to on the web, they have to download a bunch of JavaScript, all the code to run that application in the browser. So you end up with this load time that happens up front. And well, that might be okay on a fast network. You're setting up for running offline, perhaps occasionally connected, because after it's loaded in the browser, the connection back to the server, the connection to go get the data that you need to present is very, very fast because it's just shipping data. It's not passing user interface bits. And you can actually run this in like a progressive web app where it could be running completely offline, right? Install, and you're in that occasionally connected scenario where I know when I travel through parts of the states here, if I go into like Vermont, there's areas between mountains and the lake where I don't have a connection. My phone, doesn't matter what type of service I have, there's no connection. So for somebody who's working outdoors in the field, or maybe working in tunnels or someplace where you can't get connected and you need that occasionally connected scenario where let's interact with data locally, this is a pretty good scenario. Additionally, because the code's running in the browser natively, you can get faster native speeds in the browser than you can with it interpreting JavaScript. Now, you have that preload time you got to go through. It's good, and we'll show you what this looks like in a minute because I want to get into some real code here. When you're on the Blazor server, everything runs on the server, so it's shipping down just the HTML. So it'll run faster on the server, deliver just those parts that you need in the user interface, and it updates and sends information back and forth using SignalR, that abstraction we have over technologies like WebSockets. So it automatically updates things. The difference here is everything runs on the server, and it runs in memory on the server. So you must always be connected to that server. If that connection breaks, we don't know what to do with the user interface. It's going to get lost. It's not going to know what to do. So it's very network dependent when you build Blazor server applications. Now, that might be pretty good for folks because you're shipping just very small parts of the user interface back and forth. Literally hundreds of bytes is all that you're passing back and forth with Blazor server. So Blazor server actually can feel faster than Blazor WebAssembly. Certainly in the first minute or two that you're on a website, because you're not waiting for a download to happen. It's just there and painted on the screen, and away you go. But you end up then needing to manage state for all of those requests on the server. So it's a bit of a juggle. I don't need to manage state on the servers with Blazor WebAssembly, but with Blazor server, I do need to manage that state on the server. So I may need to have multiple servers or scale out with a backplane that knows how to communicate between those servers to share state. And we could use something like Azure SignalR service to share that state so we can scale to hundreds of thousands of concurrent connections. Now, those are concurrent connections, not necessarily users of the application. Does that make sense? Is that?
Yeah, got it. So the SignalR is a protocol. It's a protocol to connect between the client and the server.
You got it. Yep. So
Jeff, just another. Sorry, good.
No, please.
I was just trying to bring up another question that is so that we got it from the chat.
So Rajesh asking, Blazor web app, is it compatible with all browsers or only with Edge or IE? Rajesh, good question. That would be something that the old Microsoft would say. Oh, you can only use this with Internet Explorer.
What's IE?
Right. You can use Blazor everywhere, and in fact, I've got a website or two that I'll show you later that you can open up and use on your phone, iOS, Android. You can open it on Mac OS. You choose your favorite flavor of Linux, and of course on Windows 11, Windows 10. Choose a version of Windows, and of course any browser you'd like: Safari, Opera, Chrome, Firefox. I'm using Edge here. I prefer developing actually in Firefox a little bit, just so I've got something that isn't Chromium that I can make sure works on. But we'll show you. It does work everywhere. Thanks for the question. All right. So that's the 30-second pitch of here's the two different flavors of Blazor. Now, Nish, you know, there's another flavor of Blazor coming here. There's a
Yeah,
there's a version of Blazor coming that runs in .NET MAUI.
absolutely. And you know what, Jeff, we had the demo of that last time
Yeah,
with James on
it,
the Blazor hybrid. And
it is so cool that we can do that as web developers, publish an app and get it running natively on
yeah,
whatever operating system.
yeah, and actually, also it was very fascinating to know how the .NET code was not running inside the browser of the phone, but it was actually running in the .NET runtime,
Yeah.
which was running inside the native libraries, right?
Hmm.
So I'll bring in another question, Jeff, which is from Nitin. What does it take to switch app between Blazor WebAssembly and server? It's an interesting question.
That's an interesting question, and it's not something that we have a good answer for right now because you're going to build these components and deliver them inside the shape of a framework. So think of those components, think of the pages that you're building as something that's a little bit more um, a little bit more akin to a class library. The front end application that is WebAssembly or is Blazor Server is a framework, is a project that you're going to need to actually copy those into. You can't just flip a switch or a configuration line item to say now run it on the server, now run it on the client. It's a little bit more complex than that. You actually need to move these into the different types of application. That said, though, you can take a Blazor WebAssembly application, reference it from a ASP.NET ASP.NET Core application that runs on a server, and tell it pre-render this content, deliver it and render it on the server, and hand off so that after that first pre-render happens, all the content is now running in the browser. So you can get a little bit of Blazor server capability and all of the native local in the browser performance of WebAssembly by setting up a little bit of pre-rendering there. It's easy to do. We have a project configuration that shows you how to get that configuration working. Um, but I'm going to focus in this session talking about the individual technologies separately and showing some of the benefits of building with Blazor today.
Cool. I think that's all the questions that we have for
Okay.
now. So
So let's actually start building an app. Let's like take a look at the templates and see what's out here and what we can do with this. What do you think?
yeah, absolutely. Let's start with that. And I see some questions from Rahul coming in. So Shahzad, I'll bring these questions in as we progress,
Sure.
so that Jeff can have some time showing us some code as well.
All right. All right. So I like working at the command line. So let's just do a .NET new list. And I have the .NET 6 SDK installed here. So if I scroll up, you can see I have all these ASP.NET projects here. But the last two that I have here, there's Blazor Server and Blazor WebAssembly. And we have all of these same templates in Visual Studio 2022. So you can start up a new project there inside of Visual Studio and choose one of these templates. I'm going to create a Blazor server application to start here. And so .NET new Blazor server. And let's call this my first server app. So this is going to generate that server-side app, which builds with ASP.NET Core and hosts those Razer components and pages so that we can build, render, and deliver web content. And I'll jump into this folder, and I'll use Visual Studio Code to work on this application to start here today. We'll get in and we'll look at WebAssembly with Visual Studio 2022, so you can see that you can do these in your favorite editor, on your favorite operating system, Windows, Mac, or Linux. All of this works everywhere. So when as a ASP.NET developer, when I look at the program CS here, it kind of looks and feels like a web application. I have a web application that's being built. I'm configuring Razer pages. There's a bit here that's going to add server-side Blazor. I'm going to set up a singleton for a weather forecast service. And then I set up my HTTP request pipeline. So what happened there? There we go. So I've got all the content to configure my pipeline and HTTPS, static files, I've got a Blazor hub that's configured, a fallback page, and actually run the application. So let me just start off running the application here. My mouse and things are not responding. Come here. My network here seems to have gone. Are we still connected? Am I still there?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Just wanted to make sure I didn't lose network. So let me do a quick, I'm going to run .NET Watch here. So .NET Watch is the ability for us to start and watch an application for changes. As code changes inside of it, it'll automatically refresh the browser for us as code updates. So it's going to build this and make it available here for me. There we go. Watch is started. And of course, it put it on my other browser where I have StreamYard here. There we go. All right. So I get a basic Hello World app. And this is running on a server. Let me show you what I mean by it's running on the server. Let me pop this open. Let's take a look at the network tab over here. And of course, if I take a look at all content being rendered, I'll refresh the page. You can see the typical things that you expect to be built and delivered in the browser. They're coming down, right? I've got some HTML, some CSS, a little bit of JavaScript here to bootstrap the application, some fonts, and then there's a bit down here that turns on WebSockets. Let me click into that, and you can see it's sending messages back and forth to the browser. So let's dig into this a little bit more. Over here, I'm going to click on the navigation menu, and did you see it? It popped open. There were a couple things that went by here. If we take a look, you can see. Let me back up one more here. It's sending messages to the server that says, if we look at the decoded binary over here, begin invoke.net from JavaScript dispatch event. It was a click, and it's showing here's the coordinates on screen where this was all clicked. This was built for me. Blazor and SignalR are doing this for me, sending messages back and forth about what was clicked and what to render on the screen. And you see it's just a couple of bytes that it's sending back and forth. Let me go through to the counter page and show you a little bit about this. So this is a counter, and when I click the button, it increments the count. Big deal. Okay, you incremented the count, but look at what it did. There it's doing invoke.net. It sends a message to the server, and the server responds and says render, and it's got some content to paint on the screen. It's actually telling the browser, put this number in that location. And every time I click this, it's sending more messages back and forth to the server and repainting the screen in very small amount of bandwidth. It's not reloading all the fonts and scripts and things. All it's doing is repainting just that area of the screen that I need in order to update and work with my application. So that's Blazor server. All the content is executing on the server. It's sending data back and forth as I need it and repainting, updating the content as need be. There's a fetch data sample here that just fetches some data from a database. It's randomly generated on the server and painting inside of a table here. Now, let's take a look a little bit more at some of this content. Yeah, that's the level I want to be zoomed at. So let's move this over here and take a look at what we can do with this. So I want to go back over to the counter page first. And counter is sitting in my pages folder, right? This kind of makes sense when you see the project architecture here. I've got a dub root that has my static content in it, CSS and icons and fonts and all that stuff. But I have pages here that has a mix of CS HTML and Razer content. The CSHTML are Razer pages that are being rendered on the server, and there is no interaction with them. They're rendered, they're HTML, sent to the client, done. The Razer files are expecting interaction. They have code that's going to be executed in the browser that we're going to be able to work with. So let me hide the terminal there, and we can see I have a counter here, and there's my H1 for the counter. Current count, and it's outputting, and it has some current count variable. We're used to seeing that in Razer, right? That's some C# for a current count, and their Visual Studio Code is showing me there's the value right there, the field that it's painting on the screen. And I have a button here that has an on click, right? That click me button, and it has an on click called increment count. And we're used to seeing the on click event handler. That's something that's very common in JavaScript to have, that says, oh, go execute this JavaScript code and do something with it. Well, we prefix it with the little @ sign there to indicate this isn't JavaScript on click. This is a .NET on click. This is a C# on click. And we're going to trigger, instead of some JavaScript code, we're going to trigger a .NET method. A .NET method called increment count. And we see increment count down here inside of now what we call a code block inside of the Razer template. Now, we're used to seeing the functions block inside of ASP.NET Core, Razer pages, and MVC. It's the exact same concept, just a little bit different because we're actually going to ship this code to be interacted with and update the content of the template in the browser. Now, it's running server side and repainting those updates. We'll see how we can do this in WebAssembly and get the same capabilities later. So all I'm doing here, very simple, right? Current count plus plus. Big deal. Not really am doing anything interesting there. I click and it's doing that current count plus plus. Well, I can, of course, change that, and hot reload is going to automatically give me that updated capability of showing that, hey, I'm incrementing now by a different value, and now it increments by 5s. You didn't really see it refresh there or change state. I'll change it to 3 here. You see the little check. It patched the application, and now it's ready to go with my new code, and now it increments by 3s. Okay, that's pretty interesting, right? And of course, I can do other things with hot reload here to have some fun, right? I could say style equals, let's do a text decoration, right? Text decoration underline, and it's going to update and put an underline under that, right? Color red, right? And it changes it to red or blue, and it becomes blue. So hot reload helps me as a front-end developer here to stay in C#, able to work with HTML and CSS live with my front-end pages and content, and it updates immediately here in the browser. I'm going to take the coloring off of there real quick. Now, Blazor is built on this concept of components and pages. And this is a page that I navigate to by going to the /counter address path. And you can see it there on my path right there up at the top. I'm going to localhost /counter. And it knows to deliver this content because I've provided that bit of routing up here at the top. So it's also a component. It's not just a page. So if I go into my index over here, you'll see I reference something here called survey prompt. And if I click back, this is actually a component inside of my application. Come here, you. There it is, survey prompt.razor. And it's got this div with that text placed in here and another little bit of code. So I've created another Razer file that has the content that I want to output as a component right here. So if I get rid of that, automatically clears out, I can actually reference that counter page and place that on the screen as well. And I can pass parameters, right? Components are nice, but unless you can pass parameters in and out of these things, it's kind of a waste. I need to be able to configure that. So let me go back over to the counter, and right, we can add a parameter here that we want to use to pass data in. And you can see already hot reload is saying, this isn't good code to run yet. So I'm going to put a red indicator on here that says code doesn't work just yet, and here's the error message. But let's set up a public property here, and let's call this increment by, and I'll put a get and set on that, and I'll default it to 1. And here I will say plus equals increment by. So everything refreshes. My application, it's not clicking. It's not doing anything. I did a rude edit here, didn't I? Yeah, look at that. So let me refresh the application. I made a little bit too much of a change here, and it's kind of floundering. I don't know what to do with that. So we'll force the refresh, and it's going to restart. There it goes. And now I can click in it increments, but I can now pass in an increment by parameter and have it change the behavior of that. So I'll go back over to index, and because I created that parameter, I now have, look at this, Visual Studio Code is giving me some IntelliSense that, hey, I have a parameter now called increment by, and I can change that value to something else. Let's make it 4. And it will hopefully refresh my browser. There we can see it's refreshing. There it goes. And now I can click it in increments by 4. Cool, right? I can change the behavior of this just by changing that value, and my counter behaves appropriately. So think about all the cool components and things that you could use as building blocks to build up an application. And you can set these up and reference these and include them inside of other pages so that you can quickly generate an application. And I don't have to, like way back with MVC or web forms, I don't have to have different named files in a different architecture. Excuse me, inheriting from a control or from a page differently to be able to build these things. They're all just Razer files. They're all structured the same. They have the same events that you can use to interact with how they load, how they render and paint on the screen. Pretty cool stuff that you interact.
Yeah, Jeff, can you just go back to the counter code which you had?
Sure.
The Razer code? Yeah. So here the on-click option is it's basically a .NET option, right? So if I have if I already have maybe Angular or I know other JS framework, does it work with this? Will there be a clash, or how is it? How does it handle that?
Good question. So we can't have the same button trigger both something .NET side and JavaScript side. You can't have it do both at the same time, but you can have one call the other. There is a rich capability to do JavaScript interop, where my .NET code can call JavaScript code, and my JavaScript code can call into the .NET code. Now, I don't have a sample built that I can show you right here, right now. Wait a sec. I can put something together real quick. Hang on. Let's take a look. Let's shift on the fly here. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go over here, back into this location, and let's create a new Razer class library. And I can show you a little bit of that. So let me call this mylib, and I'll just write that down. And let me create a solution file. Cool. I'm going to add those 2 projects real quick here. There we go. .NET solution. Oh, not new solution, just solution add. There we go. Cool. Let me go back over here, and let's give us a little bit more. So now I have a Razer class library. Think of this like a NuGet package containing Razer content. I'm down 1 folder from where I want to be. All right, we're going to go up a folder. Yep, that folder. And come on. There we go. So there's my solution file, and there's my server app. I also have my library here, and my library has a component in it that I can work with. So let me make sure. I'm going to jump back over here. My server app. come on. Yeah, there it was. My first server app. I'm going to add a reference. So .NET add reference. What are you doing back here in the background? This machine is grinding really slow now. .NET add reference, and I'm going to go up one to my library. So now I'm adding a reference to that library, and I can use that content inside my project. So I have a component here. This component is defined by my library. And I have a little bit of JavaScript interop that's sitting here that I can use to call into JavaScript from C#. So I have here, this is a class that takes in a JavaScript runtime, and it will set up a JavaScript reference. It's going to import a JavaScript file that exports a bit of code right there. It's just going to set up a prompt. No big deal. Nothing too crazy to see here. But inside of my component here, I can reference this class and get that JavaScript set up for me so that I can interact with that code, that JavaScript code from C#. And I can go the other way also. I can actually have my JavaScript call .NET, and there's other documentation out there for that. I don't want to go too far down into that just now because it's a rabbit hole where there's a whole bunch of things that we could do that I want to make sure that you know is available, but I want to make sure that you see that you can call into this from here. And I can also include and reference that component one Razer inside of a page like my index page up here, right? So now I can say, if I say mylib dot, come on now, I know you have that reference here. I know you have that reference. Show me the content, right? There it is. Mylib dot, yeah, component one, and I will .NET watch this, and we should be able to see there. It's already, and it'll place that component on screen. Now that component by default now isn't showing any of the JavaScript interaction, but I can add a button and make that appear real quick. And I'm just keeping an eye on time here. So there's the component added in. If I go into thinking this through real quick, go back over here and let me add builder services. Sure, I'll add it as a transient. And this is from mylib example.js interop. So just like in ASP.NET Core, I can reference and request that service. I can have it injected for me. And let me just call this JS interop. No, wait a sec. Hang on. Let me put that in the component back over here because I want to put a button on the screen that does that. Right? So now let's do some code. And I'll put a button here at on click equals handle click, click for some JavaScript. So let's create a method for that. Private void handle click. And what I'll do is I'll call into that JS interop. And now I can say prompt and pass in some string. What would you like to ask Vivek? Right? And we should probably make this an async. Did I? An async? Yeah, I did. An async task so we can await this. We need to await it because we're actually handing off to JavaScript, and we need to wait for that information to come back into our application, into our code in .NET. We have to wait for JavaScript to tell us, hey, it's done this. So there we go. It's done building. I'll go back over here. And when I click that, now it's running JavaScript from my .NET code and bringing back. So to the question of, Can we interact with Angular or Vue or React or whatever your favorite JavaScript library is? Or maybe you've got some vanilla JS out there that you want to interact with. You can call into it, check that out, and get content back. Now, this is very simple, just displaying a prompt, but we built a component. It's in another project that we're now referencing, and it's including and painting my JavaScript here. Now, that JavaScript happens to be shipped inside that component, but maybe it's delivered and sitting elsewhere inside the project. That's okay too. You can still reference it from the www root folder inside your project up here, just like some other static content, and include and paint that on the screen and call those methods, that code from your application. And interestingly, this is being done from the server. It's calling down and saying, execute this JavaScript, right? So what would you like to ask, Vivek? Which side do you like in the next cricket match? Right? I don't know. So,
Interesting.
right, whatever, you get the point here, right? You can
Yeah.
have that rich interaction. So we've done that server side. Let's pivot a little bit and look at WebAssembly side and running some stuff on the browser, in the browser, and we'll do that with Visual Studio 2022. And you'll see the code looks the same. It behaves the same. And quite frankly, it's kind of neat to see code running in the browser, .NET code in the browser, without having to load things from the server. So I'm starting Visual Studio 2022 here. So I'll go and say File, New Project, and let's start up a new one of these. And then I want to show you a real project that's running out on the web, that's running with WebAssembly, that you can browse to and check out. That's a simple application that I have source code out there that you can interact with and see that it performs well. It's not something that that you need to search around and struggle with, right? It works kind of nice. So there's Blazor WebAssembly app. And sure, I'll just call it Blazor app 1, jump through. And you can see it runs on .NET 6. I can configure authentication for it. I mentioned we can host this with ASP.NET Core. We can configure it as a progressive web application because it's nice to have those things run in the browser and kind of scale appropriately for us offline and run wherever there's a browser. And I don't need to have a lot of server resources to host this. But I can also host this because it runs in the browser like a static web application, right? I can serve just HTML so that it sits on a server and there's no moving parts, nothing to render on the server. Just deliver these DLLs and content that run in the browser, and maybe it's fetching some JSON or some data from a search service like Azure Search or Cognitive Services, or maybe it's interacting directly with other microservices that are out there to paint information on the screen. I'm just going to leave this as is and leave it hosted inside of a static web application with just HTML. And we'll see this create and render in just a second. We'll have our realized template here that we can interact with. Yes, I have an overflow and an overview, I'm sorry. And sure, go ahead, close that. Why is my Solution Explorer over here? I like it on the left side. Come here, put it over here. When you look at the contents of this, it looks a bit like what we saw with the server application. I've got a pages folder. I've got a www root. I've got a program CS down here. But this runs in the browser. I open the pages and you see I have a counter, fetch data, and index. Sound familiar? These are exactly the same pages. They do exactly the same thing as the server side components. It has the same reference to components. It has the same code, but now it runs, instead of on the server, it runs in the browser. Fetch data is a little bit different because instead of fetching data from a database that's running maybe in the same data center as our web application, we need to actually make a request out of the browser somewhere else to a web service somewhere to get that data. And we have to do that with an HTTP client. So slightly different architecture just because we have to get the data from somewhere else because of the limitations of being in the sandbox. But otherwise, I've got a little for each here that just loops over weather forecasts and paints it as a table. And here I've got my first event handler on initialized. When the component is initialized, go get some data in JSON format that looks like a weather forecast class. And look at that. I've even got a C# class embedded in my Blazor page here. And I'm just going to go get a JSON file that's on disk and it's not sitting right there. Sample data, that's where it is. Weather JSON. So, okay, we'll get that data, we'll paint it on screen, and that data is shaped like this. And I'll click into that JSON file so you can see date, temperature, and some just random generated summary information. Doesn't matter what the content is. We're just showing it can be painted on screen. So let me run this real quick and we'll see how this runs and is delivered, and all of our content executes now in the browser. A little bit different than what we're used to as .NET developers, but for folks that build mobile applications or native applications with WinForms and WPF, you're used to having this native experience where the application starts up. And thank you, Microsoft Edge. You're going to sync my profile. I really appreciate that. So I get, right, you get a loading prompt, just like if it was an Angular or Vue or React app and it's loading content from the server. That's what's going on here. It's loading content from the server. Yes, open the DevTools. There we go. So if we take a look at not the sources, let's take a look at the network and refresh this. It loads and has content in here. No, I don't want the debugger pausing. Keep going. It loads and brings out content that looks like standard HTML content, things that I'm used to seeing. But what it's already done, because I've run this once now, I want is it here? Yeah. It's a little bit different in the different browsers. If I go into local storage, not there. Is it? No. Where am I thinking? Down here? Yeah, there it is. It appears in different places in different browsers. You can see it's actually downloading all the different DLLs. Come on, open this up a little bit more. I want to see more of that content. It's loading DLLs. Can I hide some of these columns? No. Look, and these are all the different DLLs that you might need to run a .NET application. System collections, system component model, system configuration. It's actually putting these DLLs in the browser to execute. And I still get, it's deleting stuff. That's not what I wanted. I still get that same interaction that I wanted when I click on my counter, but it's not going to the server. There's no network interaction. This is all happening live in the browser. So let's update the counter slightly here. And when I increment the count, if I do a console write line, incrementing counter, right? And I believe I've got hot reload working over here. Now, if I click to increment, no, it's not. I don't have it attached to the debugger over there. Let me restart this. So when it starts up, come on. There we go. So it's got to load a new version of that DLL. And there we go. I'll go back over to the counter. Let me bring up the developer tools again. Now when I click, console write line appears in my browser console because that's the console that it has. That's where it's running. It's actually in the browser executing and painting that data. So I get it logging over there. Okay. And fetch data loads and paints my data because it went and got that across the network. There you can see it made a request for the weather JSON right there. So these interactions are all happening in the browser. It already has this content delivered, and we're interacting with it here. And the same capabilities that I had earlier are here, where I can pull that survey prompt out, and I can put the counter component on the home page there, and I'll restart the application. Come on, browser. There it goes. And now on the home page, we'll be able to see the counter running. There it is. And it's the exact same thing. So I've got pages and components that can run server side, client side. I can build easily the exact same structure for a component or for a page and reference those back and forth so that it knows how to load and how to paint this information on the screen. How are we doing on time there, Nish? Or do we have
Yeah, so we go good with the time.
Okay.
Basically, what we do is we extend as well because this is a very casual conversation. So
Cool.
you can you can take it through, Jeff. It's up to you, like how far you want to go with.
Oh yeah, let's go a little bit further. So I was showing that you could host this either with ASP.NET or as a static website. So let me go back to Visual Studio, and I'm going to bring open. I don't like Solution Explorer over there. I want it over here. I like it on this side. You know, this is actually hosted on top of an index HTML page. It's static. There's nothing that's hosting this application. For the purposes of debugging, it does start a web server so it can listen and deliver this content in the browser, and I'm not serving it directly from disk. But it's HTML here that's rendering and painting that content, right? I've got references to CSS. I've got a little error user interface in case there's a problem. But just like folks that use Angular, React, or Vue, I've got a block here that says, put your app here. Here's this HTML block. Replace this loading with that component that renders when it finally appears on the screen. So it knows how to render and load that. And here's the little bit of script that knows how to start WebAssembly and load my DLLs and hand off processing to .NET. So I've got a very clear index HTML that knows how to start my application. And that app that it's loading is actually right over here. And it has a router, just like ASP.NET Core. It knows how to find the components and pages in the current assembly type of app. So this component, go find its assembly, and we're going to set up all the content in there to route between. And when it finds a page, it'll actually route and paint that page. But if you try to go somewhere that doesn't exist, we've got a file not found handler here because we don't want you to leave the Blazor application. So if I try and go up here and let's go to Jeff's page that doesn't exist because it doesn't exist, it'll try to navigate there and render that content, and it's going to come back and say, sorry, there's nothing here. So I've got a very rich router that I can use to control and paint and guide how I interact with this application, which means I can also capture values out of the route, just like I can with ASP.NET Core, and use that to configure my components. Very cool stuff that you can interact with. I don't want to dive too far into that, but what I do want to show you is we've also got layouts here. So that bootstrap layout that makes up this interface that puts the navigation bar over here and the about link up in the top. I have a layout here that is declared as a layout because it inherits from a layout component base, and it looks like regular HTML. I have a navigation menu component that's referenced. You can see that down here on the left. And I have, right, there's my top navigation bar. Here's the body of the application using a standard HTML article tag. And I declare, here's where I want the application to render most of its content, right here in the body, an at body directive. Put the content in here, and that's how my index index Razer and counter Razer know to generate content that appears there. The navigation menu has a little bit of a different component than what we're used to seeing. Instead of just anchor tags over here, these are called navigation links, because when you click on something, you kind of want that navigation to remember, here's where I am, so that I get a highlight so that it stays there. And instead of writing a bunch of CSS and script to go and figure that out, we've got a component that does that for you. It's already all wrapped up, and it's this Nav Link component here. So Nav Link, let me show you the counter one. That's a little bit more interesting. Nav Link looks like and behaves just like an anchor tag. It has a class that I can assign to it that it'll copy down and render in the output, the output tag. And I've put inside of it, with the default template here, it renders this span that has the plus glyph there. You see that? And it has the text counter. The href here is not just an href for the anchor tag to render that says, go navigate to this page, but it also detects if the navigation page that I'm on is the same. It adds a CSS class to that navigation element. So if I do my select an element discovery here, and we select that counter, you'll see, right, there's it renders an anchor tag, right? I'll zoom in a little bit so it's easier to see. It renders an anchor tag. It has that nav link class on it that is declared right there. But it also, because it's the current page that I'm on, it also adds an active class to it. And I can use that CSS active class to do whatever I want to make this look like it's the active page that you've navigated there. So I've got a capability here to use these little tools to generate a menu that clearly shows here's where you are in the scope of the application. There's all kinds of other little features like that that are sprinkled throughout Blazor that take standard HTML capabilities and kind of level them up with features that we think .NET folks and web application folks need and want and will use. And navigation link like this, we think is something that delivers a pretty cool experience to simplify this type of interaction that you're going to have with your project. Now, I mentioned this is a static website. This is rendering and sitting out here on an index HTML, and it doesn't actually render or do anything on the server. And that kind of points to a really cool experience that you could have building cloud applications. Think about it. If you have a web application that you want to host on your favorite cloud service, and I hope it's a nice blue cloud service, if you have a server that isn't actually rendering and doing work and it's just sending content down, that's the fastest web server you could have, because it doesn't have to think and render and return stuff. It just delivers whatever content is on disk. And the web server, quite frankly, doesn't really have much of a fee behind it, except for transfer charges and storage of whatever content you have there. You can do this with Azure Storage, and other folks have been doing something similar in the past with S3 on AWS, but we took it a little bit further because we know there's going to be some server-side content that you're going to want to interact with, some business logic. Maybe you want to query a database, and we've already got serverless technology for you in Azure Functions that you can work with. So we built and made available Azure static websites. And this is a feature, this is a service that you can use to build and work with applications without having to worry about rendering and delivering an entire ASP.NET server out there. So let me show you an application that I built using this technology that you can navigate to right now on your phone, on your PC, on your desktop, on your Mac, on your tablet. Check out hats.c#fritz.com. Can we share that link out for folks? And I see a couple questions coming up there.
Yeah, I'll do that.
We'll get into that. I have the source code here for you to interact with if you want to check it out. But this is just a simple website. I like it. I like a couple hats. I've got a couple hats in the collection. This is Blazor with WebAssembly, and you can search through my various hats here. So I happen to go to Penn State University. So if you search for Penn State, it shows a whole bunch of my Penn State hat, the university I went to. But I can reset this, and it goes back. Let me show you the source code for this, because it's a little bit different, and it's a little bit of the same. So I have a client here that is WebAssembly. It's got one page in it, that index page, and it renders and shows a collection of hats. I've got hat objects that I'm returning, and I've got a component that I built called Hat UI. So when the page loads, I say, well, go get from some API somewhere, go get the hats. And I've set up a little search method here that says, well, here's how you go and search for hats. But where is this API? How does it know how to go and interact with that? This is actually sitting out here as an Azure function inside the API project. And inside my API project, I have a hat function. And my hat function is just an Azure function defined with this function name here. Literally, I wrote 2 lines of code. 2 lines of code. Use my repository. I already had a repository built for interacting with those hats. I just brought that repository class into this project. Go get the hats collection and return an OK object result with that collection of hats. Azure Functions knows how to render this as JSON. It sends that information back. This is hosted inside of my Azure Static Web App. And when I go and request that collection of hats, it just returns that and paints it on the screen.
Nice.
Really cool, really easy way to get started and jump in with Blazor and deploy and run some complex code if you need it to interact with, in this case, to interact with my database, and return it so that that's all protected and behind the firewall somewhere else. And I'm not actually handing off database credentials for folks to interact with my database. So pretty cool stuff.
It's pretty good. How many hats do you have?
Don't ask my wife, okay? I've got I've got about 50 of them on this website, but I'm close to about 200.
So I have
Wow.
I know it's
I have
crazy.
an important question there, though. I have an important question. Which is your
Please,
favorite
let's
hat?
go.
Which is your favorite hat?
Honestly, it's got to be this one that's kind of in the middle. Let me bring that one up. I had this one made based off of that super C# logo. It's available out there in the .NET Swag repository on GitHub. But a friend of mine, she's another Twitch streamer. She's an MVP. She got an embroidery machine, and she said, "Oh, if you want, I can help you put that on a hat." I'm like, holy crow, are you kidding? So here I connected with her. I sent her the logo. She turned it into an embroidery pattern, and I sent her a blue hat, and she had it stitched on the hat. And now I've got a super C# hat. So I mean, you can download, you can get that logo on GitHub, and you can have a hat made. Most folks and the custom embroidery shops here in my part of the States, they'll make it for about $25 US. So about the same price as if I were to buy a hat that was already made off the shelf. But the fact that this was my first custom hat that I made, and it's kind of like a signature for me because I'm C# Fritz. I'm kind of proud of that, and you can see the picture. It's already kind of dirty from having worn around to a bunch of different places.
Nice. I mean, I've always seen you in the hats, but I never noticed you were wearing different ones. Now that I know this, I'll be paying more attention next time.
So I've actually taken this just a step further, Nish. And here's the depths of how loony I am with hats, how crazy I am with this. When I run my Twitch stream, right? So I broadcast a couple days a week over on Twitch. there's actually a chat bot sitting there that watches the camera that I'm broadcasting, and as we're going along, you can execute the hat command, ! hat. It will take a picture from this camera that you're watching me on right now. It'll isolate this part of the picture, just like you see on the website, and it'll send that picture to Azure Cognitive Services, compare against this collection, and it will tell you a little bit of information about what hat I'm wearing.
Wow, that's incredible.
That it's just a little loony. It's just a little bit over the top, but I thought it was a cool way to teach just a little bit. I'm going to go just slightly off script here and away from Blazor. Just a neat way to show and teach a little bit about how to use. Yes, I know. I agree to the services. How to interact with machine learning out on Azure. Is this? I think I'm on the wrong user account here. Let me jump over to another. No, don't print. Wrong hotkey. Custom Vision AI, and let me log in with my account. And I can show you. I can just take you under the covers to show you how that works. Now, this isn't a Blazor application. Yes, I know. 2-factor authentication. This one. Let me get.
Much better than writing passwords, though.
Oh my gosh, yes. Right?
Yeah.
But what's weird is I got to do the facial login and all that.
Yeah, that's true.
But this is a service anybody can use for free, and you can see here's the catalog of images that it's got loaded in here, right? And you can see I've got this We Are hat, I've got this Seattle hat, a Jurassic Park hat that it knows about, and this is the Vegas Golden Knights. That's the Las Vegas hockey team. But there's lots of training images in here. The Hard Rock Cafe, the Smithsonian Museum, S.H.I.E.L.D. from Marvel Comics. So
nice.
So
these are training models, right? Like this is what you will use to training. Yeah. Okay. Nice.
1 second here. There we go. Family had to check in with me. So a service that you can use, any application, whether it's Blazor, you want to build with ASP.NET, you want to build with .NET MAUI, and you need a little bit of machine learning, you can stand up and run this capability out on the cloud. It's free for a certain amount of data. I've got 120 different hats loaded in here, and each one of these has different. It has 15 images, at least 15 images. So here, Thor, God of Thunder. Yep, there we go. I have a GitHub hat right there. So kind of crazy, but it was an interesting way to teach a little bit of machine learning and how you can use it to do something fun, something a little bit out of the box. So
and absolutely, it just takes a few lines of code to do it. I mean, that makes it much more easier for anyone to just write something. You have a crazy idea, just have to use the APIs to do it.
Yeah. Right. So I thought it was fun then to put this Blazor front end in front of that catalog of hats and show off a little bit of my obsession.
Right.
So I see a couple questions. Should we get to some of the questions here in chat?
Yeah, let's get to that quickly.
All right, cool.
Vivek, do you have anything to check with Jeff before that?
No, I do have a couple of questions which is very similar to the ones which is been asked by audience.
Okay. So let's start with Shahzad, who asked, does Blazor WebAssembly and Blazor Server run on IIS?
Great question. Yes, it does run on IIS. You don't need to run on IIS, but you can run it on Kestrel. You can run it on Apache. You can run it on Nginx. You don't even need a web server to run it on. If you want to run that static website instance with Blazor WebAssembly, but it'll run on any web server with ASP.NET Core when you need that Blazor server or the rendered, the hosted with ASP.NET Core capabilities.
Right. And the next question from Rahul, Angular with Blazor learning curve for a WPF developer. Wow.
Angular versus Blazor learning curve for a WPF developer. So based on experience that I've heard from other folks who are WPF developers, making the shift to Blazor was easier for them because they already knew how to write code. They already knew the C# that they were writing. They didn't have to go in and completely learn JavaScript. So they just like whether you're building with Angular, you're building with Blazor, you're going to have to learn how to shift from XAML tags to HTML tags and what that document object model looks like. But if you're
Right.
doing it with Blazor, you're going to be using a technology, a language that you're familiar with in C# and .NET. Versus if you go to Angular, you've got to learn all the different directives. You've got to learn the JavaScript. You may have to learn TypeScript and how you want to interact with some of that content. And that's okay. That's a technology that's been around for 10 plus years now that folks are used to, folks can interact with. And the team at Google has done a nice job of building a whole bunch of documentation to support Angular developers. But if you want to stay in .NET, if you want to stay building with C# and building pages, and let me go find that hat component so you can just see what it looks like, and building stuff that has .NET code in it and renders and feels and looks like something that you're used to, we think this is a great alternative for folks.
Right. I think one of the things that I just remembered when you were showing the console.write line,
Yes.
and it was context aware, and it was actually logging into the browser's console. I mean, I happen to remember this thing where you have so many bunch of C# code that doesn't even have any platform dependent code, which can easily be brought into the WebAssembly world and reuse them, right? With
Oh, great
nothing
point.
comes
Yeah.
free.
Yeah.
That's really amazing. I mean, yeah.
And right when we when I take a look at the component that was injected over here, let's not look at that one. Let's go back over. Oh, I closed Visual Studio. If we look at Visual Studio, right, I can bring in other NuGet projects, other
Right.
NuGet packages, other projects that have my business objects that I pass back and forth. No, you know what? Actually, I have a good example of that in that hat project. Hang on. So there's a shared project here that has my business object. It has that domain object of, well, here's one of Fritz's hats, and here's the tag that defines the image and some of the other information, the name of that hat, the description, the various pieces of information that I need to use to store in the database and display. I'm using it both on the server and in the client. And like you said, doesn't have a dependency on a specific framework. It's just here and being passed back and forth.
Right. So reusability, a big plus if you are moving from same .NET technology to another.
Yeah. Our friends in the JavaScript environment love this because they can load stuff up in Node and share those same business objects and components in their front side JavaScript. Same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. The next question from Karthik. He asks, we are looking to develop a SaaS application. I get a lot of recommendations for React, Node, Node.js. Can you help me understand why Blazor or .NET, not React and Node.js?
First thing that I tell folks when they ask, well, why .NET and not Node, is I jump over here to the Tech Empower benchmarks. This is a third-party organization that tests and shows the performance, the raw performance of web frameworks. And if we look at some of the tests they have here, this is the plain text test. This tests just the basic interactions with a web server. And you can see here right off the top, ASP.NET Core is the number 2 framework on here. Building with C#, if you want to build with the V technology, that's only slightly faster. But the fastest commercial, widely supported framework is ASP.NET Core with a bullet. 7 million requests a second. And if we search for Node in this list, Node comes in their tests at only about 600,000 requests per second. And this is the raw performance of the web server. As you start adding code to do your business logic and things, it's going to obviously not hit 7 million requests per second. But when you start off with ASP.NET Core and working with Blazor technology, with .NET, with C#, you're getting a base that is the fastest performing framework available on the web. There's other tests you can click through here, and you can see how fast it performs compared to the others when it comes to rendering data from a database, running multiple queries. JSON serialization is one that we've moved up in the list here. Where is it? Where is it? There it is. ASP Core, 1 million requests, right? Per second, and it's down in the 50s. This is actually not quite the most recent. These tests were from earlier in 2021. The .NET 6 results, when they get added in here, you're going to see us much higher on this list. But you're starting off with a technology that runs faster than Node. You're also starting off with a technology that's supported and the key features you need that are going to run for your application. The base framework is being designed and maintained by Microsoft. So these tools and features integrate very well with Visual Studio Code, and are being maintained, researched, and handled for various security the updates that need to be deployed. You're going to see changes that are deployed when there's issues, when there's bugs that need to be fixed, versus when you're working with Node and you're in Express. There's a lot of things that are off the beaten path that you start bringing into your project that are being maintained by the open source community. There isn't necessarily a company out there that's going to handle and respond to requests and customer needs immediately. So there's a question of support there. You've got paid support available from Microsoft if you need capabilities with .NET, if you see bugs or performance things that need to be addressed. We've got an amazing team sitting out on GitHub that's able to interact and help out with these various situations. You can see all of the source code out here that you can interact with. You can see there's folks creating issues, folks sending pull requests. We're open source and producing and working with this. So when folks ask, should I use ASP.NET or should I use Node? These are the reasons that I like .NET. Use the technology that's going to make you productive. If your team is very good with JavaScript, if your team is comfortable working with that technology, go use it. Absolutely. If that makes you productive, go use it and have a great time. I think you're going to build a great application using the technology you're comfortable with. But if you're already using C#, if you're already in and familiar with the .NET ecosystem, use ASP.NET Core, use Blazor. You already know how to use these tools and things. You're already familiar with NuGet, and it's going to work for you in a better way than having to go and relearn all your technology. Dive into an ecosystem that you're not necessarily familiar with, having to relearn things and have that on-ramp effect before you can get productive. We think this is going to get you someplace where you can be productive quickly, get the support you need, and run with the fastest frameworks that are available out there.
Right, and I think we also have a customer story like Reagan, which moved from Node.js to .NET Core for obvious performance reasons because they are similar to the SaaS application. And the interesting thing on that is obviously they get the performance benefits, but they were able to reuse the infrastructure as well because Node was running on Linux, .NET Core runs on Linux, so you can reuse the existing infrastructure and make bigger benefit with the performance as well.
Yeah, it's where is it?
It's right there. Yeah.
Did I just scroll past?
Yeah, Control F Reagan maybe. It should be in the.
There it is. Yeah,
that's all.
Great point. And our friends at Stack Overflow had similar feedback when they migrated from .NET to .NET Core. The performance boost that they saw was significant. So you can check these out over on the customer website, customer showcase website about why .NET. Good point. Thanks, Nish. Appreciate you pointing that out.
Sure. And we have a question from Bruce who asks, React or Blazor with .NET 6 backend? I think more or less you covered the same thing, right?
Yeah. You use what makes you happy. Use what you're going to be productive with. I like Blazor.
Yeah. And we have the next one, micro frontends architecture. So that's catching up for sure for the front end UI.
Sure.
So will Blazor support this? If so, how to achieve?
So this is, gosh, Nish, we had a great discussion about this over the last few months
Yeah.
as we were looking at the concepts of micro front ends. You can do it. It feels a little, it feels a little bit tricky to implement right now. It can be done. It's not something that we have a framework or a template that'll deliver it right out of the box. The templates that we currently have support a more of an MVVM type framework to be able to build and interact with components and pages. But it's something that is supported. You can do. We don't have, like I said, we don't have templates out there. We have a couple nice articles about how to do it, but it's not something that we're actively investing in right now.
Right, and just to add on to that, because we invested heavily on the POCs to figure out where we stand and things like that. I think the short answer to is yes, doable, but we don't have a template. And it works with JavaScript, so you can use things like, I don't know how is it pronounced, Pyrrell or Pyrrell. You can use them and mix it with the Blazor. You can do that too, or you can use your microservices related UI in a component, and you can that component can be delivered as NuGet packages and then inject into your main app. So there are ways to do it. I think you should. Yeah, go ahead, Jeff. You were saying something.
No, it's not. So it's something that can be explored, that can be done. I think we need to figure out if that needs to be on our roadmap for .NET 7 as a template based on the popularity. So.
Right.
There's, as we've seen other frameworks appear and ramp up, right? That's why when we now have, for folks that want to build with Angular or React, those are popular frameworks. So we ship templates that get you started on the right foot with ASP.NET Core and React or Angular in the box with .NET. And those templates, of course, open in Visual Studio 2022 and Visual Studio Code.
Right. And we have a question from Nathan. How do we make different components interact with each other?
Oh my gosh. So you saw a little bit. I showed. Let's go back over here in the server. So I showed how here's a page that includes that counter component. Where is it? Let me reopen that browser so we can see that running. There it is. So I can have that counter host the fetch data component as well. If I go back into counter, right? If I want to compose and include that fetch data, I can just reference and add a link to it there. And now my counter has the weather forecast inside of it. So, and of course I can do that the other way, right? If I'm inside fetch data, I can include the counter here underneath the data that's been presented. And right, I can pass in an appropriate, let's say increment by 10, an appropriate parameter into it that makes sense for interacting with this component. So now when I go, what did I do? Yeah, it's restarting. There it goes. Right. So now when I go to fetch data, my weather forecast hosts the counter. So I've got flexibility in how I want to compose things. I just include one component inside the other. I can change up the parameters I want to pass in so that they behave appropriately for whatever my scenario is. And we can get really complex with these. If you go back over to the hat example that I had over here, and we take a look at the page for this, right? I've got a hat UI component that I'm passing a full rendered C# object. I'm passing a C# object in that is a instance of one of my hat objects. And if I go back to the component over here, you can see I'm not just taking in a string, but I'm taking in a C# hat object here. And I'm using that to render and paint the various bits of information on the screen for it. So I don't just have to pass primitive types, strings, integers, booleans, but I can pass full instances of objects and interact with them between components and pages and the like. There's other ways to manage state and pass them between pages and things. We've got documentation and samples about that in the Learn modules in the Blazor learning path.
Right. So we have, does Blazor assembly, WebAssembly supported on mobile? I think yes.
Absolutely. Check this out. If you have your phone handy, go ahead and grab it. You can navigate to this website, hats.csharpfritz.com, and see it render on your phone. I didn't do a very good job with the CSS on this. Gee, Nish, a back-end developer guy not doing a good job with CSS. I would have never heard of that, right? But when I toggle this into mobile mode, you see they overlap. It's not great, but it is rendering. It is painting in the screen. You can still do a little bit of a search here, right? If I'm going to search for my NASA hats, it filters down to just that one hat here on the screen. So it does work. Fritz needs to get off his keister and fix the way that the content renders here, but it absolutely works in mobile. It works on every browser. You can even bring it up on your TV if you have a browser running on Xbox, and Roku doesn't have a browser. But all of those.
Totally doable.
Oh, I like this question.
Can we use Angular components in Blazor?
Absolutely. So I showed how you can do that JavaScript interop. Let me bring that up. So I don't have a full example that jumps through and shows calling and rendering Blazor, rendering Angular content from Blazor, but right, you can certainly reach through using the JavaScript interop, and if you have the Angular content on screen, you can reach in and call a JavaScript method that will interact and paint and update whatever Angular component on screen if you want to use that technique.
Very cool. So I think that's all we have the community questions right now. But Vivek, did you learn something new?
Awesome. All right.
No, I mean, I think this is great. I'm like, I'm just baffled by the hat and the custom vision, and I'm just thinking about it. Like, how do you do that? It's simple, but it's an amazing one. It's a great connect there. That's one thing, and I just want to tell the viewers as well. If you want to get started with it, we have launched the Cloud Skill Challenge there, and you can just go to that link which is posted on the screen. Just go there and take up the Cloud Skill Challenge. We have 25 to 26 modules which covers everything which we are covering, getting started with .NET, C#, and then Xamarin, and then we also have Blazor and Maui and everything covered there. So you got time till January 8th. So make sure that you spend some time and complete those Learn modules. I'm going to complete those Learn modules for sure. I've already completed 10 Learn modules out of those 26, so I'm going to complete more. So so let's keep going on that as well. So if we can wait for a minute or two for any questions, or
sure.
Nish, we can wait for 2 more minutes. Any last questions?
Yeah.
And
absolutely, Nitin, thank you for joining us. Nitin says he likes he finds our discussion very interesting. So thank you, Nitin, for joining. And of course, thanks to Jeff who actually agreed to come onto our show. I know it's early for him, but Jeff is a pro already on the streaming thing, and we are still trying to figure this out.
We are going to send you some samosas and chai.
Oh, fantastic.
Nice.
Cool.
Right. Cool. I think we're good. We don't have more questions. We shouldn't hold Jeff now. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you so much. Happy holidays, and enjoy your time off. And wish you a happy New Year.
Oh yeah, Happy New Year, friends! So good to see you. And maybe we'll get together and we can do a little bit further on this if there's interest. Take a little bit further dive and talk about components and some other technologies
Right.
on a future episode.
Yes, Jeff.
Absolutely.
Thank you very
Absolutely.
much. Thank you, Jeff.
Alrighty, we'll catch you later.
Bye. Take care, everyone. Bye bye.